Mm-mm.
All right, going live. It's Monday, March 27th, 2023. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, we are talking about archiving the internet. So, when COVID hit a few years ago, one of the first things I did was cancel my subscription to the local rock climbing gym. Because, if you've ever used a gym, gyms ain't cheap anyway. Like, in most of America, gyms are already pretty expensive. In New York...
And the way gyms make money, we've talked about this before, get a lot of people to subscribe and get memberships, even though only a small portion of them show up. If they all show up, the gym will be in trouble.
But you know what is way more expensive than just a gym in New York City? A rock climbing gym, because those are really expensive anywhere.
That's more if the equipment is much, you can't just buy massive.
You need a giant warehouse. You need like 40, 50-foot walls. You need a lot of specialized equipment. Hella more insurance.
More staff.
So to give you an example, right now,
people run free in a room full of, rock climbing the way you let them run free in a room full of treadmills.
Right? So. Like, you're not even allowed in until you prove that you know the basics. Like, otherwise you're a risk to yourself and everyone around you in these places.
Yep.
So, I canceled that basically instantly when COVID happened. And as of a couple weekends ago, I have re-signed up. Actually, for a different rock climbing gym, New York City.
The most convenient one.
Yep, there was one a few blocks away. Like, not too far away. Like, it wasn't a problem. And it was kind of the better gym. But I got to tell you, a 15-minute walk versus a 45-second walk is a surprisingly big difference in terms of, finish with Geek Nights, dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I'm just going to walk downstairs and climb for 10 minutes and then come home. Like, that is great. But, that's $120 a month to have access to that place. But I saved a lot of money over the last 3 years.
As long as you use it, $120 a month, it's okay, right? I mean, the Zwift virtual bike world, right, costs, let me see, I forget what it costs.
And I know you use the hell out of it. I see you using it.
I use it basically whenever the weather's not good and I want to ride bike.
Yeah.
It costs $16.32 a month after all taxes and bullshit. But you have to amortize, obviously, the cost of the equipment. Right?
Yeah.
So, but you can choose your equipment, right? I happened to choose the bike trainer that was many hundreds of dollars. Maybe it was even $1,000.
Which makes sense. What do we talk about on Geek Nights? If you're into something.
And I guess, but there's the cost of the bicycle also, but the bicycle's also used for outside bicycling.
Yep.
But
like, if that's your hobby, like, spend the money to have the good equipment if you can afford it.
Okay, but they sell the Zwift Hub now, which is only $500. Any gym membership I could get would not have a biking experience superior to this.
No, it's going to have one of those regular, completely stationary exercise bikes and like a row of treadmills and a row of ellipticals.
Right, so there's no...
And plus, my building has treadmills and exercise bikes downstairs if I wanted to use them. That's free.
My bike, the gym in our building has 2 bikes. I use them. They're not actually... They're pretty damn good, for a stationary exercise bike. But
they're not a trainer. They're not the same kind of experience. Plus, you're not just in your own apartment for going as long as you want. Like, you don't have to worry about anyone else.
Downstairs, there isn't, a virtual bike world.
Yeah,
it's not, it's like.
So I'm feeling it, but I got to say,
literally riding on my bicycle.
I also did my first run of the season. Finally got warm enough, so I ran like 11 miles, and I didn't lose any conditioning over the winter because I've been working out like hell for like 3.5 years because of COVID and being stuck mostly at home. But climbing, I have not done in 3 years. And that isn't just like, my arms are weak. That is like, it uses very specific muscles and tendons that normally don't get really worked at all in a normal person's life. So... yeah, there's a lot of pain, and I have lost a lot of ability there, and I'm doing, like, V2s on the wall on a scale of between 0 and infinity. 0 is like walking up a stairway. 2 is like normal rock climbing that people would do. Well, bouldering, I guess. And then the scale is theoretically unlimited above that. Never done higher than a V5 in my life, and I don't plan to, but... yeah, I pretty much lost every one of those muscles.
So they just make up numbers, like I guess there's some criteria for what number.
It's funny. It's
something.
It's not really scientific, but it's sort of agreed upon by the bouldering community, and it's roughly, from my understanding, based on everyone agrees that some trail is a particular rating.
Did they change the V based on like what equipment you use? Like,
Oh no, this is bouldering only.
Okay,
so no ropes. Just
okay.
all you got is climbing shoes, chalk, and your body, and nothing else.
All right. So what would so you're saying like the infinity would be like climbing Olympus Mons, with just your body and nothing else.
They basically make a new rating. But when someone does something that no one else had ever done before, then they figure out, was that materially harder than the next lowest down that we've already all agreed on.
Is there an official rock climbing association that does this?
Sort of. It's kind of complicated, and like it's different between the US and Europe, and they actually use different systems. But the ratings are actually surprisingly consistent. Like if I go anywhere in the world and I do a V2 or whatever the local equivalent of a V2 is, they're about the same level of difficulty. And you know what they're like? They're a lot like the original step ratings in DDR. Like if I tell you, who is like you're really good at DDR and you played it a lot, this is a 7-footer, you have a very good understanding of what that's going to be like to do. An 8-footer,
it's hard. If you just started playing DDR, there's no way you're going to do it.
Yep.
Like if you play DDR a bunch, it's like, you know, you're gonna do it and but it's, you know, if you're one of those people who does the really ridiculous songs, it's
gonna feel really easy.
It's an easy.
It's like a shooting star, and an 8 would be more like music, and a 9 would be like Dropout. So bouldering kind of the same way, but yeah, my wrists hurt more than they've hurt in a long time.
You'll get new wrists.
Hey, robot body.
Yeah. So over the weekend, I just want to comment quickly, right? I went to this affordable art fair that I heard about.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, it's sort of like a gallery, but sort of not. Basically, what happens is it's almost like a convention in some ways, but only a dealer's room. It was a lot like Mocha Fest, only, you know, right? People show up to vend, right? And they basically, instead of your booth being like a table at a con, right? You display your wares. The booths were like these sort of like little rooms, right? You would get basically each booth in each hallway was like a rectangle, but what the short side of the rectangle was missing and was facing the main hallway. And then so you have this deep rectangle with white walls that are all the way up to the ceiling. And you hang your arts, right? Most of it is hung square arts. There were some other sculpture type things, right? And whatnot, right? But you just hang your arts in there. And, you know, maybe you make a little tiny table with your business cards and, you know, you stand there selling your arts, right? Some of them were artists. Some of them were like gallery owners representing artists, things of that nature. And when they say affordable art fair, right, they mean like, yes, you know, normally you would go to an art auction and pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for an art, right? Whereas here, you're only paying single thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
For the arts, right?
Which is a little more reasonable in terms of the price of wanting to enjoy something. A thing, this is again personal opinion, not investment advice or professional opinion, but very expensive art tends to reek of money laundering and asset hiding more so than people actually valuing the art that much.
These arts cost many thousands, right, is because if you think about it, the person who made it is only an artist, right? And it's like if let's say you're an artist who's making, you know, oil paintings.
Yeah. How long does that take?
Right. How long does that take? How many can you make in a year, right? Well, let's say you can make 30 a year, right? Well, if you sell them for $1,000 each, and you're like not even accounting for materials or any other costs or anything.
That's less money than Seymour Skinner canonically makes.
That's only $30,000 a year. It's like, and how many can you make in a year, right? It's like you need to either crank out a lot of them or make, you know, but if you're cranking out a lot, how good are they?
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, this highlights a very fundamental question around how labor is allocated around value-based pricing versus effort-based pricing.
Right. So, but just out of necessity, a lot of these arts were, you know, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, right? But that's affordable for an actual original art, not a, you know, some of them were photographic prints, but they're still like what the photograph people do is even the paint people also, but it's like they do limited. They're like, I'm only going to let anyone print this photo out big like 5 times and that's it. So like you can be guaranteed that this fucking awesome photo I took and spent a whole of a lot of time photoshopping and making awesome will only ever be printed out at it's big enough to put on someone's wall, right?
Usually they're also framed really well in
Well,
a
you pay extra for the
complementary
framing, right.
way to what the photo is about.
You pay extra for the framing,
Yeah.
right? Like the one really cool one I saw there. Let me see if I can get the name of them. Where's the name here? Oh, here it is. Dan. I'm not sorry, Dan, if I mispronounce your last name. Dan Piech, Piech. Concrete Canvas. It's vastphotos.com/concrete.
Ooh.
What this person does is they walk around this Manhattan city, New York, right? And they look at the concrete, the sidewalk, the street, etc., mostly the sidewalk, and looking for like interesting, just naturally, right, occurring compositions that are on the street.
Ooh, that's
right?
a good shtick.
They discover them, right? They don't make them. They're not like splashing paint on the ground or anything. They're just walking around, looking around with a regular old camera, right? Looking for like an interesting composition that would look really great blown up large. And when they find one with their regular camera, they come back, right, with like some ridiculous camera that's like ridiculous resolution that aims straight down. And then they make, right? And you can, if you go to their website, it's like I would hang that on my wall. It's like, even though it's just a picture of the concrete outside. And then if you go to the website, it'll tell you like, you want to print this, and it shows you how many they've made, right? It's like it's a limited edition. That's how they can get away with charging X $1,000.
See, it's almost like we can do that without making a fucking NFT to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even NFT, right? I'm sure if you went to Dan and he had some limited run where he only did 5 and he already did the 5, and you were like, listen, I really want that exact one, he'll be like, for enough money, he'd be like, okay,
yeah.
I got the raw file in Photoshop over here. I'll get you another one, right? But no, we saw a lot of there were many arts there that, no matter what your style is, you would see something there that's like, damn, I want that on my wall. And then the only thing stopping you from hanging it on your wall would be, it's still thousands of dollars. But I saw a lot of awesome biz there. It made me wish I was a little more wealthy.
So in the news, there's a lot going on. We're only going to cover a few of these things, but I want to start with the big one. This whole TickTock ban, which is not new. Like, this has been in the works and rumbling for a long time now, but it's coming to fruition, and a lot of people started noticing it, partly because there was just a big congressional hearing where American Congress people were asking the CEO of TickTock questions, and of course, American Congress people, with the exception of 5 of them, don't fucking have any idea how any technology made after 1945 works.
Yep. So basically, this congressional hearing was interesting. I usually watch all the technology-related hearings, especially when there's something like this involved, right? But this one was interesting in that, first of all, most of the hearings I've seen, it's usually Democrats versus Republicans, right? They're not on the same side of the deal, right? Or at least, if they are on the same side, they have some sort of strong divergence, like the one where they were going.
Well, case in point, Republicans and Democrats both want to increase military funding. They want to do very different things with what that military is.
Right. Like I watched an antitrust hearing against the big tech, right? And the Democrats are like, you're a monopoly, you're anti-competitive, right? Are you using your search results, Google, to keep other businesses down, et cetera, right? That sort of thing. And the Republicans come in, like the worst ones also.
Yeah.
The worst ones are at this hearing. They happen to be on that committee, right? And they're coming in like, are you censoring the conservative voices, right? It's like they're both against the people that are testifying, but they're completely off base from each other, right? Whereas here, right, it's like you sort of have 2 different things going on at this hearing that are sort of both simultaneously true, which is that the Congress people are technologically incompetent.
Yep.
They're asking all sorts of stupid questions that are meaningless, and you sort of want to side with TikTok on that. But secondly, they're coming at the TikTok people for is this a national security threat? Are you a danger are you spying for China? And it's like, is there some evidence of that? Yes and no, right?
Yep.
I think my gut,
well,
information.
There's a lot.
My gut tells me that the way that I've seen people in government acting, right? People who aren't ridiculous, tells me, in the opinion of some guy, right? For whatever that counts for, is that they must know something the public doesn't know. There must be some government information, right, that some federal agency has discovered regarding TikTok that has been in briefings to Congress people or others that is not known to the public.
Well, remember way back when Obama...
that leads them to have a good reason to believe that, yes, indeed, ByteDance is the company that owns TikTok, right?
Yep.
That they are in some way acting on behalf of the government of China.
Well, they are beholden to the government of China and its laws.
Least, we know that for sure, right? But that's like saying Google is beholden to the United States, which is also true.
Yep.
Right. So that doesn't mean much.
There's a lot going on here.
Being beholden to a foreign government means that you shouldn't do business with a company. That means you can't do business with any company that's not in your country.
Well, it wouldn't matter normally. The reason this is mattering to a lot of interest and why this is a topic of debate and discussion now is partly because the world is starting to align once again into 3 blocks, very similar to what happened during the Cold War. And this has been ongoing for a few years, but it's escalating rapidly over even the last year. The Ukraine war, of course, pushed this, but we're generally seeing a block consisting of effectively NATO and NATO-aligned countries and the bulk of the United Nations, as well as most of the large powers in Asia-Pacific. That's sort of like Block 1, say First World. Because for the listener who might be unaware...
we call the first world now, that's the golf playing world.
Yep. Well, so that's a different... Because the problem is first world, second world, third world originally meant, are you in Block 1, Block 2, or unaffiliated? Like, it didn't have anything to do with economic development, and that was sort of that was added later, and people used these terms incorrectly for so long that they fucked it up. So,
but now we can't use those terms now. There's regardless of the etymology, it doesn't matter now, right?
Interestingly,
we turn the golf-playing nations. Those are
there are many golf-playing nations who are in this second block because the second block is Russia, China. Yeah. And a number of other powers. Iran is aligning with them. India is getting a little weird about this. And
so there's the somewhat to some degree democratic Gulf playing nations, and somewhat to some degree autocratic.
And the third block is the rest of the world who are unaffiliated, mostly because
non-golf nations.
Yep. Or even a lot of the third block countries also have golf courses, but they don't want to be involved in a fight between 2 giant mega blocks of the rest of the world. They would rather just not have to deal with that. Very similar to what happened during the Cold War.
All right. The point is this, right? On the topic of should you ban TikTok, right? Well, if it is true that TikTok does pose a national security threat, we've already taken the very sane and correct measure of saying you should not have this on government-owned devices that may have important data. And I think that that's really too lenient. It should be that these are the list of apps that should be on a government phone or device and no others, period, right? That seems just common sense computer security. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if it does really pose some sort of national security threat, they're spying on Americans and doing something shady on behalf of another nation, then it's like, well, I guess we kind of have to do something about it.
So here's a tricky question.
Just let them get away with that. I'm not done with the list of things.
All right, because there's a real tricky question underlying all of this.
Right. The next question, right, is, well, is that a thing? It could be. It might not be, right? We don't have the full data on that. There might be some secret data. But there is also appears to be some other motive for getting rid of TikTok in that it poses an economic threat in that, the United States, sort of all the big tech companies that were providing major platforms were in the U.S. up until this point. Google, Apple, Facebook. Right?
But it's not a direct economic threat. It's not like a direct pure competition because it is.
But it's an American, all the previous companies, right, that were big at least, big.
So interesting note. Multiple European nations are going down the same road. France just announced a ban on government. Basically, France just announced all the stuff the U.S. did a while ago recently, and a number of European countries are similarly planning to ban TikTok.
Sure. Okay. So, but, is there some other motive for banning it because you want to protect protectionism against the U.S. platforms, right? And who knows if that's true or not, probably at least partially. And then the final question is, well, we still have net neutrality to discuss here, which is like, hey, should you shouldn't me, a person with internet access, right? It's like, aren't you in some way being like China if you were to block TikTok the way China blocks things? Right? It's like, well, you say China's bad for their Great Wall. Well, if you block TikTok, isn't that hypocrisy, right? People, average, normal people should be able to access the whole of the internet, right? At their own choosing, for better or for worse.
Yep, but
right?
nuanced and tricky question. So, for example, the U.S. and many countries block known malware botnets that are based in Russia. We've done that for some time under national security auspices.
But it also depends on what the exact implementation of the block is.
Exactly.
You are demanding that all of these private ISP companies change their routers to block all packets going to and from some set of IP addresses?
Probably not.
Are you removing DNS entries from ISPs? DNS servers, and that someone using a different DNS server who knows.
Yeah, because that gets into the question of, in the U.S. with the First Amendment, you may have a right to access the data, but nobody is obligated, including the government, to make it easy.
Have a right to publish the data.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have a right to access it.
Arguably,
it's a right to speech, not a right to listening.
Well, that actually gets a little thorny. But another thing around the ban is more likely what would happen is it would be forced out of all the app stores because
that's easy to do. That's something because the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, right? The app stores are places of commerce. Congress has pretty much unlimited, if they pass laws at least, they can regulate commerce all they wish, and they can say you may not sell that. And even though it's free, it's still
now. Why would they do this? This
right?
gets into thorny questions from earlier because if it's an economic issue, sanctioned entities, like if you're an American, you can't do business or interact in commerce with a sanctioned entity, and it is very likely.
So I can't open up a company. Right? Like, there's a lot of French animation studios that I don't know if they still do, but they would outsource animation.
Last I checked, I want to say that petered out partly because North Korea has been nuking again.
It could be. I don't know what the status of it is, but it was a thing at a time.
Yep.
At least I know that for sure. Right?
But like an American, you can't.
Disney could never do that because even if they wanted to, at any point in time, at least not since the Korean War, because laws, right?
Yep. So here's a funny example. Say, because the industry I work in, if the U.S. government let me, which you can do pretty easily if you talk to the right people, I could go to Cuba. I cannot.
Well, now you can. That was loosened a little bit in recent times.
Yep. But you know what I cannot do because of sanctions that are still in place? I cannot do any work while I'm there for any American company. No matter what. It would be against the law for me to accept a phone call that might have been from a coworker while I'm there, even on my own personal device.
You can go there and lay on the beach, though.
I could.
Which I would love to do.
I still think one of the greatest travesties in American history is the extent to which we fucked over Cuba solely to prevent them from succeeding as a communist state near the U.S. Not to say that Cuba was perfect. Far from it. But the U.S. did not make the situation particularly better or help in any way, but I digress. That's a topic for a show with people who know more about geopolitics than me and Scott. But
anyway, so on the topic of the TikTok ban, should they do it? Well, should they do it depends a lot, at least for me, on what the it is. What technical measures will they be taking to ban it?
I bet we're going to see ByteDance sanctioned as an entity.
Right. And two, what is the evidence for the, whatever bad thing that they claim.
So here's where the original thorny thing. I'm unpacking the stack of concerns that I could raise along the way. So one of the arguments about TikTok being a national security threat isn't just that it spies on people, because all social media, like TikTok, everything spies on everybody.
All the children with the propaganda?
Yep, it's the propaganda. It is that.
But what propaganda is there on TikTok? The only TikTok I look at is like a dermatologist who's an actual dermatologist.
Yeah, because you and me and weirdos who curate our feeds do not encounter
really
this
Chinese
stuff.
Propaganda on TikTok that's getting to the American children?
It's partly more around what is not on TikTok, like what is banned versus not banned. They can shape narratives. There's an argument that if China, say, decides as a government to invade Taiwan at some point, or economic sanctions increase or weird stuff happens, does the U.S. as a defensive posture want a Chinese government-directed app to have direct access to millions of American social media feeds in this manner. Like, that is one of the concerns that is actively being discussed in the actual debates. Because this hearing was just a public sort of showcase. The real debates are happening in committees right now. We're not going to see all that. You can read a lot of transcripts. I have not done that because, as interested as I am in the deep details of geopolitics, even I could not make it through some of those transcripts of these discussions.
My personal advice is, like, what should you do, the listener?
I would say don't use TikTok anyway. TikTok is bad for you.
Right. I would say
forget China.
You should not create a TikTok account. You should not install TikTok apps on any device you own.
I would consider TikTok to be a malware app myself.
Right. If there is a TikTok creator who has chosen to use TikTok and their content is not available on any other channel, then do what I do, which would be to basically go in your normal old web browser, maybe private browsing mode or something, right? Ad block for sure. It's always on, right? Go directly to that person's TikTok channel, tiktok.com/@them, and look at their don't go to any feeds or anything, right? Just go to them specifically, right? And look at their TikToks, and then that's it. Don't go to any other, start getting influenced by, who knows what TikToks it wants to show you automatically.
Because remember, propaganda is not as...
GeekNights TikTok, which there isn't and probably won't be, you would just go to tiktok.com/@GeekNights, and that's it.
Yep, but just remember, propaganda is not as obvious as a lot of people think it is. It's not like when you drive alone, you're riding with Hitler, war poster. That is not how propaganda works anymore.
Go to a specific creator, tiktok.com/@somebody. It's not like on the GeekNights page, there's suddenly going to be China is great things showing up, right? That's not going to happen. Right? And if it did happen, well, then just stop going there at all.
But the type of propaganda that TikTok likely engages in and will engage in is consensus generation, or the appearance of consensus around a particular topic, or subtly nudging the narrative by choosing what gets featured and what doesn't get featured, that is how modern propaganda works. Sometimes it's by accident. Like, even if YouTube is not being nefarious, their algorithms are just trying to get you to stay in YouTube. And that might mean that's why certain things get promoted over other things. It's a whole other topic for another show. But the real moral is don't use TikTok because it's going to be a can of worms no matter how this situation goes.
Yep.
In some other news, so NVIDIA, you might remember a while ago we couldn't buy any video cards because crypto bullshit guys were using video cards not to mine bitcoins, but to mine even shittier coins. So the CEO of NVIDIA, I have this quote here. Oh, no, the tech chief, not the CEO, the tech chief. Michael Kagan, the CTO, was being interviewed and making some statements, and he said cryptocurrencies do not bring anything useful for society when asked about NVIDIA's support of crypto.
Good.
Which is fine. That's great. We can buy video cards again. In fact, video cards are plentiful.
That is correct.
And it's good to see increasingly, while we all know this is true, everyone knows this is true. Even crypto people know this is true. They're just scamming you. But it is important for people who are in positions of power like this, or positions of notice or notoriety, to say it out loud, because a lot of people don't believe things like that until there's a consensus of people who they trust or who they perceive as authorities saying it out loud. It is a moderately big deal that a big name person at a big company like this will say that out loud on purpose.
Very minor related story. There was recently a case where many celebrities had promoted some NFT bullshit.
Oh, yeah, they're all getting sued now.
Right, I think they all lost or something.
They're all fucked. Details. There's a whole...
Right, but basically, they were paid to promote the NFTs, but they did not disclose that they were paid, and people thought their promotion was a genuine promotion, not an advertisement, and that was illegal, and they got in trouble. So, there you go.
There's also one of the big exchanges is getting sued by the SEC. Crypto is in deep shit, and I'm a personal strong believer in Bitcoin zero, meaning they will be worth $0 while I am alive. But the buried lead in this NVIDIA story is that you know what's going to buy all the GPUs and make it hard for you to get video cards? these
The machine learning.
Yep,
biz.
generative models, AI, machine learning. That is where NVIDIA is going to be focusing and has been focusing for a long time if you haven't been paying attention. Video cards are the tip of the iceberg of what companies like this do. And dedicated boards and chips for machine learning, that's where a lot of the resources are going to be going for the next decade.
Yeah, I mean, that is the real, we wait, since, phones, like 2007, we've been waiting for like the next technological thing to happen.
And this is it. It's not great. We're not saying AI, like this machine learning stuff is all like super useful or great right now, but it is the next big thing.
Great uses.
It does.
But yeah, it's for real. It's like, when people were hyping up crypto as like, this, this is going to change everything. It didn't change shit. It was garbage.
Yep.
This is the real deal. This is what's going to be. I almost feel like I actually have to go and learn it or something to make sure I keep my job or something.
We got a notification at work that we're not allowed to use external models for any work purposes, which is a prudent policy.
That's just common sense.
Yeah.
At least for now. All right. But, this is like...
I was looking at
This is going to be a thing probably for the rest of your life. So.
Yep. I guess what I'll say is, don't evaluate what crypto. We know what crypto is going to do. What this the current machine learning stuff you're seeing, all the AI stuff you're seeing, is doing right now. Because it's moving so fast, the actual science and the actual technology, that nothing that has happened up to this point even matters compared to what things are going to be like 5 years from now. Like we're on one of those little vertical sigma curves. Like anytime the rate of change is suddenly a straight line up, you're in a transitionary state, meaning nothing you do during that straight line matters at all.
Yeah, I mean, look at you look at like the original web, right, in like the early 90s,
if you double down on static HTML pages,
like that whatsoever, right? So we're still in that sort of phase of where we like if machine learning is computers, we still have Commodore 64s, and what we're actually going to end up with, when things stabilize, it looks nothing like that.
Yep. And we'll be talking about that.
Only barely resembles it.
This is going to be a topic that's going to come up a lot in Geek Nights for probably the rest of Geek Nights.
Probably, or at least, what's it, 10, 15 years. So.
Yep. So the other big news, and this one is, we can't cover everything that's going on here, but if you're not aware, the Internet Archive basically lost a huge...
going on for a while.
Yeah, a huge court case. Right. And much like what we just talked about with TickTock, there's a lot of complexity and nuance, and none of this is black and white.
It's pretty straightforward, right? So
but I mean in terms of what should be done and how should things like this be handled.
Oh, well,
what's the right way to handle this? Not why did the lawsuit go the way it did? Wait, usually I'm the one who's like, well, the lawsuit, blah.
So here's what happened, right? If people weren't paying attention, right? The Internet Archive is a great organization that, we're going to talk about it in the main bit, probably, definitely. And it serves a very important purpose in that they're pretty much the only organization that is taking on a very large effort of archiving just lots and lots of things that, regular old libraries, right, used to be their job, are not getting done. Mostly the internet, digital things. Right?
I mean, imagine the internet 10 years ago. It's so different from the internet today that it's unrecognizable, and half of it's gone.
Yep, and it's like the Internet Archive is keeping a lot of things available and alive that would otherwise not be available or alive. And they've moved beyond just, web pages with their Wayback Machine, but also, books, movies, literally anything that they can get and archive and store, and they still have a super long way to go, but it's like they're already way ahead of basically everything, right? And
they are the modern Library of Alexandria, and they're doing good work.
Yes, it's a very important organization, but the people running that organization had a problem, which the problem was called hubris. Hubris was the problem. And what they did is they came up with this legal idea, at least in the US, and there was a group of people that supported this idea, and they signed on to that group. And their idea was this: if we get physical copies of books, right? Let's say they get a physical copy of the book club book, the Titanic Verses, a book that is still under copyright in the US because it's not that old, right? At least not old enough yet. And they say, well, we have a physical copy of the book on hand in our library, in our vault, right? We scan in the book to create an ebook version, right? To preserve the book. That's totally fine, at least legally and morally for sure. And then, because we have one physical copy of the book, we think that we are allowed to lend out the ebook to one person at a time, if we can ensure that only one person has, the ebook, the ebook copy, right? Our ebook copy of this book, and we have one physical copy, that is legal. Now, that is a questionable legal thing.
With a capital Q. Think about how many. Remember that little text you see in a lot of books that says something like, this work can't be transferred, reproduced, modified,
whatever,
put in a different format.
There's a questionable legal theory that, to my knowledge, has not been tested in court, and to my guess would lose in court. But regardless, they had that theory, and they developed that system and employed that system. And no, obviously, book publishers, the big ones in the US, were not happy about that at all, right? They want you to buy your ebook from the Kindle store or from a bookstore and give them money, right? Okay, so fast forward to the COVID times, right? And they get even more hubris at the Internet Archive, and they say National Library Book Emergency. I forget what they called it, something like that. Right? And they removed their restriction, right? And they said, you could you could borrow as many copies, even more people can have the book out than we have physical
Now,
copies.
that is all caps questionable from a legal side.
They had a theory that if we do this, it's okay, and then they just stopped doing that, right? Now, unlike, say, Crunchyroll, which started out as a company of piracy that then went legit, the Internet Archive has no way to do that. It's not a business, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, I agree that, like, this is actually, personally, I think that's an morally okay thing to do, right? I would like to see it work, but I can't deny that, like, legally, even someone who is not a lawyer can clearly see that is just piracy, right? That's clearly just piracy that would get you, and you're not hiding the piracy like most people do.
Yeah,
You're doing big time piracy, the kind that will actually get a lawsuit on you. And they got the lawsuit on them, and they lost the lawsuit, right? So from here on, they can either stay losing, in which case there will be some sort of penalty, or they can appeal, which I'm gonna guess they would lose again. They might not.
I don't see any way to appeal. Like, I don't see. There's no obvious procedural errors in this.
The problem here is that, I'm on their side from the sake of, I think that they're morally right, and I want their important work to go on and for them to continue to exist because they're an important organization.
They got to be smart about this in a capitalist society.
An illegal, most likely, or at least so far, clearly illegal thing, and if the punishment is too steep in terms of, it'll probably be some financial penalty to them, right? For losing the case, they'll have to pay the book publishers X dollars in damages. It might ruin them, and that's bad. I don't want them to be ruined, right? So it's just a sad tale of hubris. I don't know where it's gonna go. There's some people who are mad, who really love the Internet Archive and are mad that hey, bad book publishers. And it's the book publishers are evil and whatnot, but the law is on their side.
Well, also, we're in a situation where the book publishers are, to a degree, looking out for the authors so they can be paid to be authors at all.
Yeah, to some degree, right? But it's you could just go to the regular. I mean, how many people really were using this to? It's that's the real question.
Yeah.
Is did if legally, yes, right? But how much damage was really done to authors by even if the Internet Archive kept all this lending going on unlimitedly? In my opinion, probably none.
Yep.
Right? No one's using the Internet. Who's using the Archive to check out books? Right? People who are going to pirate the book themselves from somewhere else. Right? They were never going to pay. So, it's just a sad tale of how the people running an organization's hubris can ruin their otherwise important work.
But it also points out a fracture in that the concept of libraries was invented in an era before modern capitalism and digital works, and we haven't really figured out how to handle that as a society. Well, there's a reason why.
In the U.S., their idea has just been to cut funding for the libraries, which is really bad.
All right. Put a little marker. But anyway, things of the day. It's just a short little 3-minute, 47-second video about the evolution of the Kantele, which is a Finnish harp. And it is very well done. It's just the same person playing this instrument. and they're playing examples of the instrument from various stages in history, but they're also performing the kinds of music that people are performing on this instrument in those periods of history, and they're updating their costumes along the way. This is a extremely entertaining video, and I highly recommend everyone watch it.
I commend the great deal of research that clearly must have gone into the making of this video.
Oh, this video is great.
Yeah.
I subscribe to the channel too.
This video from the listener, thank you, listener, for pointing out this great video in our forum that the other listener could join if they wanted to. Basically, this is just some YouTube guy goes and interviews the COO, or at least the regional COO of an internet service provider in Connecticut. And now this is interesting because we recently, not that recently, there was a thing of the day that was a ISP that was like one guy setting it up in his rural area somewhere, right?
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, this is like a medium-sized ISP, right? It's not like, your Verizons and your whatever's, your Comcast, like the big ones. It's like this medium kind where it's like they big, right? They got trucks and all kinds of equipment and warehouses and and they got everything, but they're just not some massive telco. They're like this medium-sized in-between place. And what's really interesting to me about this video is A, they show you everything, right? They're not hiding anything. B, they do a lot of bragging about how, yeah, we're not the evil, cable guy like our competitors, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we help you out. We're good. We're on your side. C, I looked at their website. Their pricing is actually, if this ISP was in my area, I would switch to it from Fios just based on this alone.
Oh, yeah.
They're charging $50 for like 300 megabit. That's less than Fios for the same deal. So, but yeah, it basically the regional COO shows YouTube guy like all their technology and how it works, and it's pretty easy to understand if you know how your home network works. You can understand how this works. Only this fiber. It's really awesome to see the equipment and see their warehouse and all that biz.
Yep. It looks like fiber is easier to deal with than it was when I was doing this kind of crap back when I worked.
But fact that the regional COO understands the technology gives you a lot of confidence in the company.
It's a good sign.
Right? The only thing that doesn't give me confidence in this company, which is called GoNetspeed, is that I looked them up. They used to be a publicly traded company, but some years ago they were acquired by private equity. And what's also interesting is that I looked at the border of their coverage, and obviously they don't cover here, right?
Yeah.
But they cover literally people 1 block away from my mom's house. But not my mom's house. And
That's a shame.
I'm like, if they just move their coverage like 1 block over, I could get my mom to switch and she would get better internet and save money and all. It's like, but it's still fascinating to see, what's really going down at the ISP. What does their fiber optic shit look like? This is here. We'll show you the whole thing.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward up to a point.
Yeah, it's straightforward up to the whole point. When you look at this, you could.
Yeah, well, I guess the commercial arrangements for the upstream, like that stuff gets complicated, but that's not a technology problem.
Yeah, that was not pictured. It showed basically everything between the customer and the ISP itself. They didn't show beyond.
But also that upstream is more business problem than technology problem.
Yeah. But this place is big enough, they got a handle on it.
Yeah. In the meta moment, the Geek Nights Book Club book is ongoing, The Satanic Verses by Simon Rushdie.
Today I went to the library, right?
Ooh.
And I told them I wanted that book. And dual purposes, they have currently at the Queens, not the New York public libraries are weird in New York City. There's a Brooklyn library, a Queens library, a Bronx library, right? And this New York public library, but they're all sort of the same, but they're all not the same.
Yep.
But the Queens public library right now, if you go and get a library card, they got a special Mets Mr. and Mrs. Met library card.
That's pretty good.
So I went there, and because I've had a digital library card from there, and I tried to get a physical one way back in the day, and I just failed somehow. I had just moved here, and my driver's license did not yet say the New York City address.
Oh.
And I didn't yet have a utility bill with my address on it. Because but now my driver's license has my address on it, so I was able to get the physical library card. And I told them, get me this Titanic Versus book, so I don't have to buy it from Amazon. and they said, okay, we'll email you when it's here, because the library nearby is very small. It's like 2 rooms.
Yep, it's a big book, and there's a lot of allegorical density, so I think it'll take a little while for us to finish it. But if you're starting
I think the library will be excellent choice because A, not paying money.
Yep.
But also B, I got to finish it before I got to give it back. That'll help things along here.
Not a bad strategy.
Yeah.
Also, we were live at PAX East 2023, likely the last masked PAX or masked convention, I'm expecting. Can competitive and casual coexist? We did the panel. We hung around the con. We tried out a bunch of new tech that Scott bought, and I think, hopefully, with PAX West and especially PAX Unplugged, we can get back to earlier era of Geek Nights convention content and coverage and stuff. So
yeah, maybe we could go make use of the, in the summertime, once we finish the stupid website, we could go outside and use it.
We'll go do class outside. Record a Geek Nights outside.
We could.
We did some tests before with some earlier tech, and I think now is the time. Last time was not quite the time. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. I think our next convention for Geek Nights is probably going to be PAX West. Maybe I'm thinking about going to ConnectiCon. We'll see what the situation is. Do a few panels there. That's a very easy trip. You don't have to come if you don't want to.
Maybe.
I'm thinking about doing like a day trip.
It's really about how convenient it is, right?
Yeah. We'll see. I'm thinking about it. I was going to go. So the year COVID started, I was actually planning to go back to ConnectiCon because, we'd resigned as like senior staff and just do some panels. And for the first time, just experience that con as a regular ass attendee who did some panels and not like having to run everything. And then COVID happened. And obviously I haven't been to ConnectiCon since. So kind of want to go back. I looked at a picture of that convention center and it hit me right in the nostalgia, just right there in the nostalgia bean. So, archiving the internet. We just talked about this in the main bit. It's obvious how important this is. The internet is one of the newest and most transformational things humans have invented. Like, it is a brand new kind of thing. Arguably, the best argument that you can make in terms of trying to expand the history and say it's not that new is that it is the logical extension of the telegraph, which was absolutely earth-shattering in how it changed the world.
Yep.
And the fact that regular old people like us can put stuff on the internet, even from some of its earliest days when it was opened up to the public, all the things that happen, humans are making so much content. There is so much that is created and lost on the internet on like a weekly basis at this point that preserving even a fraction of it is going to be extremely important for the future of humanity. And you think, well, how important could it be? Think about how hard it is to research what happened 100 years ago now when there were books.
We could end up in a situation where 100 years from now, historians know more about the 20th century than they know about the 21st century because so much of what happened in the 21st century would not be stored and saved in any recorded form that they could still access, right?
Especially,
but the 20th century is on papers that have been, locked away somewhere, or at least on, some sort of physical discs, or, something that is saved that someone can still access and read and look at.
Yep. But also, there were a lot of, like, if you look at old, even ancient history, you'll see that we see history of a relatively stable period, and then suddenly, like, the pottery is different, and suddenly, like, a bunch of shit is different in the historical record. But usually, data from the transition is lost. So if the internet, which has been changing and evolving exponentially for as long as I have been alive, since 1982, the internet's been changing like every year is radically different than the previous year. If that is such a transitionary period, then that is an extremely important period that is being lost in real time.
Yeah. The way I think about it is this, right? Like, think about history, right? Well, there was a Bronze Age at some point, right? And they made shit largely out of bronze, or at least somewhat out of bronze, right? That's why it was called the Bronze Age.
I just read a very long essay about urbanization and the early Bronze Age.
The point is, in the Bronze Age, they learned how to bronze, right? And they had bronze items, and those bronze items have survived to the present day, and therefore we know something about the people of the Bronze Age, right? We know information about them. If, at some point in history, there had been a wood age, right? An age of only wood. Only thing we would know about the wood age would be from the bones of the dead people of the wood age, right? Because all of their writings in wood, their houses made of wood, their everything made of wood would no longer be around, right?
Well, case in point, in a lot of histories,
there could have been a wood age, for all we know, probably even, and the people of the wood are lost.
There's a lot of more recent cultures, like in Babylon and Samaria, where we have a lot of writing from those eras, but we only have like the boring bookkeeping, like the stuff that people archived for business reasons and political reasons. But what we didn't have is the writings of regular old people in everyday life. We have all the receipts, but we don't have any of the novels.
Exactly. So, if we continue to write things on the internet, like just some lousy GeekNights MP3s, right? Well, let's talk about GeekNights MP3s, right?
Yeah.
Right now, we pay a company, right, Libsyn, to host them on hard drives to where people can access them publicly for free. We could put them on the Internet Archive, which would be illegal because Creative Commons. I think some of them are there, and they will preserve them. And there are many other people we could pay or not pay to store these MP3s on their hard drives, their storage devices, and maybe or maybe not serve them up. We also have local copies on hard drives that we own personally, right? So if we were to pass from this world, which will happen someday, right, what will happen to those MP3s?
Best case scenario, like the best possible case for those MP3s, is that somehow we have made enough money and we feel and the world is in a situation to where we would be comfortable spending that money on what I'm about to describe instead of other causes. We build a trust with the intent of trying to keep that data around as long as possible.
And the people at that trust actually have to do the work that our dead selves can't hold them accountable for.
Yep.
Right?
They got like a bust of Scott like in a data center, right. And they're like, yeah, like, this data center is to keep that guy's mouthing alive.
Right. Even if we find some young lawyer, straight out of law school in their 20s who really believes in this kind of work, and that ends up being their legal specialty of like preserving running trusts and preserving things and whatever. And there's a board of trustees and all that stuff. And we put it all together and it's well funded, right? The board of trustees will pass from this world. Right? How long will they keep that going? The trust that preserves the GeekNights MP3s, right? Through all the tumult of the world, right? It's like, we see already the archive.org, the Internet Archive, is not invulnerable. The Libsyn bill has to keep getting paid. That company won't last forever, right? Our podcast always going to be a thing, right?
GeoCities websites aren't a thing anymore.
Right? It's like I have hard drives here. They'll stop working eventually. Even if someone inherits them, are they going to try, take care of this NAS and preserve this data? And it's like, how dedicated will they be to that? If just 2 of the drives crash, that's the end, right? They can't. They had to be on top of that.
Even heavy archival storage solutions
has to be on top of that after them.
Say we put it all on long-term, like worm memory, or we put it on like the kind of stuff that you put like regulated data on. One, it's a lot of data because it's audio, we've compressed or whatever, but even those formats degrade, and they're almost worse in some ways because one of the truest things to know about digital data is that the data that gets preserved is the data that is accessed frequently. The less frequently it is accessed, the more likely it is that bit rot will happen. And before you say, well, bit rot is absolutely a thing, and there's a lot of things that cause it.
Yeah, well, this is the principle behind the architecture of, Git, the source control system, right? Is that unlike previous source control systems, when you clone a Git repository, you are actually cloning the whole thing in most cases, at least, right? So like if someone has an open source project out there on the GitHub and I say, I want to do some work on that project, and I do git clone, I now have an entire copy of that project and its entire code history now on my computer. And every single person who ever worked on that project also has a copy. So it's like if it would take, in order for that to be lost, even if they delete the GitHub repository, anyone who's ever cared about that project enough to check out the code locally on their own computer could restore it fully or almost fully.
Yep.
Right, to the state it was in when they checked it out.
So a better way to keep GeekNights going.
If something is very popular, it is naturally backed up many, many times.
Which in a way is a nice self-reinforcing system wherein the things that the society collectively cares more about are preserved by more people via more means.
Yep.
But that also means that some data that people don't care that much about, because as you can imagine, what society in aggregate cares about doesn't always necessarily align with what a historian might care about or what a society maybe should care about. So already that doesn't necessarily mean the most important data is preserved.
Right. If we think about like some memes, it's like, yeah, you know, the platforms come and go, and people always will repost the old memes to the new platform.
It's an older meme, but it checks out.
TikTok, I bet I can find all your base on there somewhere.
Yep.
Right? It's like, it's protected. But
well, like a lot of those old YouTube I said YouTube Flash games because like all those old Flash games, what a lot of people did is just play them, record themselves playing them, and put them on YouTube, and you can experience most of them that way. Like that's a degraded copy, but it's still a copy.
That's a separate issue of where the data has been preserved, but the technology to use the data, right, has not been so well preserved. But there's a lot of people making like Flash, you know, alternatives and emulators and things of that nature.
And we're going to skip the whole, how do you preserve an ephemeral digital interactive space like an MMO? We've talked about that on Tuesday Geek Nights before.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question, right? It's like, if the website changes 100 times, you know, the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, what's the official version of my GeoCities site? The first one I made?
The Wayback Machine just records many versions, snapshots over time, and you can look at the same website at different points in its history.
Yeah. But a lot of websites I made are just gone. I mean, I didn't back them up. I was a kid. I wrote them in a notepad, like literally wrote them in Notepad.
I have backed up pretty much everything in the 2000s, but yeah, there's some stuff in the 90s that I didn't back up, right? And it's gone. Right?
Yep. I've even been looking for like some of my old stuff, and yeah, none of that is out there anywhere.
Floppy disk. I can't look any further back than the 3.5-inch floppies, and that's it, right?
Searching the internet and searching other archives for, of all things, the ICQ numbers I used has been an interesting way to actually find more data than I expected about me, because that is a primary key that was unique to me. That is a string of numbers, a few strings of numbers actually, that made it around the internet. But even then, pretty much everything I found was either a dead link or someone had just taken that data and put it in a profile about me on a site I never used. Like the new Oticon forum has my ICQ in it because they imported my account despite the fact that I was banned from the old account. I can't log in. It says I'm banned, but...
But like, you know, my GeoCities page, it's like I had one, but it was not, I guess, significant enough to be preserved by whoever did some work.
Oh, even worse. I had one that was the one people knew about. Then I had a network of like 20 of them that I had made because each one gave me 2 megabytes. And I used that to run an NES ROMs site that was active for some time. But that is a case where I was studiously trying to make sure nobody knew about it. Nobody preserved it. It was like a, do you know about it or not situation. I like made sure there was no way to tie it back to me whatsoever under any circumstances. So that's almost impossible to archive if the person making it actively does not want people to keep it around.
Yeah. Another difficult thing is that, you know, you talked about the telegram at the beginning, right? And it's like, are all telegrams preserved? No.
Nope.
Right? It's like there was a lot of direct human-to-human communication. Phone calls aren't preserved unless they're like the president's phone.
But imagine if a historian today could read every telegram sent and received from like the British government telegram office in 1840.
Right. So on the one hand, it's like for direct communications between people, right? There is a need for secrecy, privacy, etc. in the immediate moment, right? Snapchats that disappear, right? Instagram stories.
But in the long term, long after everyone involved or could ever be harmed or influenced or annoyed by that conversation is long dead, think about how many of the things you read in school are the private letters between Thomas Jefferson and some guy.
Right. It's like, you know, those were on paper, so they got saved somehow. Right? They looked in someone's desk after they died, and they took them all. But it's like, yeah, even your inconsequential stuff, like, you know, hey, when are you picking me up from the pizza place, right? It's like that still, once your life, you know, Does that information need to be known to everyone now? Does it have value? Does anyone get to preserve that? No. But in a long time from now, it's like, there was this thing called pizza back then. People had to be picked up. There's so much information.
We think it was used for ritualistic purposes.
Yeah, sure. It was like, there's so much information, even in just that, and if you could see, there was lots of communications of this nature, right? They could gauge how popular different things were.
And before you say, but everyone knows what pizza is.
In worthless data.
I could go take names of food and drink from less than 100 years ago, and if I tell you about them, you will have no idea what the fuck they are.
Yeah, historical food channels on YouTube are a big hit, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? The food you eat now will be historical food in a long time.
Yeah, ask an aristocrat in America in the 1700s what punch is, and it's not what you think punch is. Also, it is vile. It is the vilest alcoholic garbage. Like, good Lord. Whatever opinion you have of the American founding fathers will be lessened further than it was already lessened by, slavery and how America turned out if you read what they liked to drink.
All right, so even if we agree we want to preserve everything, right? So here's the problems, right? So problem number one is the technological problem. And basically, if you could somehow magically, right, get all the data on the whole internet all at once, where can you fit it? It's like it's stored already on the hard drives and storage devices.
It's the internet. You've made a copy of the internet that is obsolete before you finish making the copy.
Well, forget that, but we don't have enough storage devices to just have two of it.
Yep.
Where are you gonna put this one place where it has enough hard drives to hold the whole internet and versus the rest of the earth? It's like,
now one could argue that even if you have it, and even if we only look at one snapshot of it, like, say the U.S. Census, every 10 years, they take a snapshot of the internet and they store it. And they somehow solve that problem, which is already, we're already at an unsolvable problem. So everything we're talking beyond this
is isn't enough storage to hold the whole internet.
But say we've got it. The fuck do you find anything in that? We can't search the actual internet effectively anymore.
No, we can't.
So, now, luckily, I do think that is an area where machine learning is going to solve that problem.
Maybe.
Data curation and finding data in data. But data lakes are a concept that are very important because they're basically, if I had to summarize it and not get into the tech of it, a data lake is when there's information that's too much for you to process, but that data might be valuable to me someday. I want to do something with that data, but I don't have the resources to heavily curate that data today. You dump it all in a data lake, meaning in the future, you might dive into that lake to pull data out to do something with it, but you're just trying to keep as much of it around as possible for the time being. But data lakes are not archives. Data lakes disappear shockingly quickly if not heavily maintained.
Data lakes are mostly a corporate thing, right? It's like, you have your database where everything is structured and there's a schema and it's set, right? But the data lake is more like, okay, dump all the spreadsheets and all the PDFs and all the everything. Into
dump all the logs from all our servers there, because why not?
Right. And it's not perfectly structured. It's not, ideal, right? It's not the database, but we do have technology that will allow us to search it to some extent, right? To look at it to some extent, to query it to some extent. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, as it would be if everything was organized perfectly, but it still provides business value, right?
Yep.
But you can't operate one of those on the scale of the whole internet. That's not going to work.
Now, let's say we could. Let's say we even solve that problem. The laws of every country, the way copyright works, the way that whole giant can of worms makes it extremely difficult to archive anything without being sued.
Or at least blocked, right? If you try to scrape some website, they're going to block you because you're costing them money.
Yep. And even if you get the data and maybe you avoid the public, if you archive data, but you don't republish it or do much with it, then you can definitely get away with it. They can't sue you if they don't know you did it. But even then, if you're not sharing it, then bit rot sets in. You're not using that data, so no one can find that data. And when you die, that data's gone.
And if no one can find it, that's letting people have access to it is a better way of backing it up because more people will have copies of it, right? If you make a website, and then you have your personal backup, but it's there's some person out there who's weird and is taking screenshots of your website every day.
Yeah.
And there's some, it's like, yeah, I talked about all the backups of GeekNights that we make, but it's like
There's a YouTube channel that we don't endorse that it's called just like Rim and Scott, and it just has the audio. Every single fucking Geek Nights episode, just in a YouTube video with a really blurry like photo of one of our logos. Someone's making that.
Yeah, it's like, probably some bot.
Yep. But Creative Commons, so I don't care. But
I don't care either. But some listener out there might just be saving all the MP3s, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's one more place. So if something's really popular, it's like some actual Hollywood movie, right, is completely safe now, right? It has no worries about that because there are people with DVDs and Blu-rays.
But imagine imagine a show someone makes that only thousands of people watch. They upload it to YouTube. And then they die and everyone forgets it. Like, that's going to get lost so fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
what can we do realistically? Right,
I think this is something that needs to be addressed by state level entities. Like, governments are the scale of how this kind of problem has to be solved. And I feel like data curation and preservation for historical purposes should be a primary duty of large governments. But we're a long way from that.
I don't know if it's something that like should be a duty of governments, but for any other reason besides, there's nothing else big enough to take on a task that.
Arguably, that's the only reason to have a government, to handle the things that are too big for small groups of people to handle on their own.
Yeah, but I think really all the governments have to do is, tax people, which they already do, but do it more, and put the correct percentage of their budget into libraries.
Yep. Libraries, Library of Alexandria. That's how you preserve data.
And then the libraries have experts at doing exactly this.
And what are the experts going to do? They're going to take all the questions we just raised and figure out
answers.
They'll be like,
have the answers. You go to library school. Someone out there who already went to library school is like already has all the answers to everything we asked her in this show.
Our friend Pat is trying to do this just for conventions, and I've learned a lot just talking to him because he's studied this. And generally, if you let experts solve these problems, they'll solve them. They might not be able to save everything, but you know what? If they know we can only save 10% of the internet, they're going to do a much better job of figuring out what 10% than a government will or any random person or any tech company will.
I mean, and really, it's like saving anything at this point, right? It's like
so one thing I've seen
so many things disappear already. Like there are things that I saw in my life that no longer exist and can no longer be found, right? It's like, I don't think that happened a lot I think that happened before recorded history. You lost everything in your whole life, right? There was no recording of anything. But I feel like, in the 20th century, it's like things that existed didn't stop existing, right? It's like there's actually very few things from the earlier part of my life, pre-internet, are no longer around at all, right? It's like you can find them. It might be it's a vintage shop or an antique shop or who knows what, but like memories and documentation of those things from the 80s and 90s are all around. We right? It's things from the early 2000s.
Yeah,
right?
There's a lot of photos of me up until high school, and then there's not a lot of photos of me until good digital cameras and smartphones with cameras appeared.
It's like things from when I was in college and when we were in
I have like 30 total photos of us in college.
Yeah, it's like, well, things from those times are actually the hardest things for me to find record of. As terms of the period of my life. Right?
Yeah, when I find a photo of myself from like 2002, I get legit excited.
But the digital world still wasn't advanced enough and was definitely not preserved really very well at all.
But now if I die, like my Lightroom stops working as soon as that credit card bounces to Adobe, which means all those RAWs are gone. And then Flickr dies when the subscription...
I have them on a NAS.
Yeah, I got them on a NAS that'll die when like the estate doesn't know what to do with this old piece of hardware.
Yeah, right.
So one thing, I've talked about this on Geek Nights back from the beginning. This is something I've considered seriously since high school, and I'm still very serious about doing it. Actually, I'm getting old enough to where I should start to put this in motion more affirmatively. My general plan is to form a very small trust for my death with a small amount of funding, and basically I would like to do something to the effect of some number of years after my death, all the media I have ever created, or all the media that was in my estate, is public domain and released to the public.
I mean, I can make that
Every
1
email,
second after my
every
death. Why
piece,
do I
like
gotta
every
wait?
my entire hard drive, my browser history, everything. The reason I would
Okay.
wait
The
is
the
that
things that might, even private things that might
yes,
hurt other people who are
that's
still
it,
alive.
exactly it.
Yeah,
Because there
yeah,
might, you know,
yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of emails people have sent me where, while I have the perfect like legal right to reshare those because they were sent to me, I could see how someone might not want every email they ever sent to me to be released to the public. So I want to structure this. I want to find a way to do this that makes sense. I don't know what the time frame is, but imagine if, like today, someone who lived in 1945, every letter they ever wrote and every photo from their entire extended, like their entire data archive just appeared. And you could just dig through it and research it, explore it. I would love for that to exist about people from this era. And I'm willing to put up or shut up. I'm willing to be one of those people. But
Well, you know that, like, rich people, very fabulously wealthy people, will set up like the so and so library, right?
yeah,
Where, like all the presidents have them at least, right? All
yeah,
the
because
big
they're
people
also
have
trying
them,
to
right? It's
set
like,
their image. I want the raw data to go out. I don't want the
Right.
curated, like, here's what Rich Rim wanted you to think of him when he
I
died.
wonder if we could make an organization that's just
Ooh.
called the U Library, and people would sign up and pay money, and they would come and
Yeah.
library people individually, and as long as there's enough people,
You give it a donation, and you have a sliding scale or whatever, and
people who are currently alive are basically paying and paying for everyone who came before, and then the people who come after will pay for them.
and that's the kind of org that could figure stuff out, like what is the time frame that makes sense from a legal and moral perspective before this data gets released.
So basically, while you're alive, you would pay this organization. They would come and archive everything about you, right? And then when you pass from this world, they come and go through all your stuff and record all of it, right?
Yep.
They don't need to take physical possession of all the objects,
Yeah.
but at least
But like, it has to be legally watertight to where this org could, on your behalf, go to Google and say you have to give us access to this account so we can download the archive per this will and this contract, and here's a bunch of legal theory that backs it up.
They already have stuff for that, right?
Yeah.
Like Apple, you can put like.
But I am,
inheritance everything.
regardless of like if anyone else does this, this is something I am very serious about doing before I
You can
die.
make a whole organization that does this. The only problem is it's going to archive the lives and histories of wealthy internet individuals.
It's
right?
better
Not
than nothing.
archiving.
Because that's how all of history has gone. Most of the letters we have, I just talked about how important it is to be able to read letters people wrote. But other than letters that soldiers wrote home after wars, most of the letters we have from history are rich white people sending letters to each other.
I think what you should do is you should make it this organization, right? When you pay for it to archive yourself, you also have to pay for it to archive somebody who cannot afford it. Right?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Some other person. Could be some person who doesn't even have
And
the internet.
this gets
The
into
homeless
like
person, I don't
StoryCorps. Like,
know.
there's other ways to archive information. Look at things like StoryCorps and all the groups that just like, hey, find old people and just talk to them and learn as much as you can from them and record it all for the future. Like, there's a lot of ways to archive data, and the most important thing, because we've gone on long and I'm tired and hungry, there's got to be a lot of different approaches to this because we don't know what technology is going to look like even 10 years from now.
Yeah, like you said, you might get into a trouble, like with the Flash situation. It's like,
Yeah.
we save all this HTML and no one has any web browsers. It's like all the water and you can't drink, right?
Yep.
You got the books and your glasses broke. So
I think that was a fine show.